Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you are watching or listening to this, and welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. My name is Lisa Kinski. I'm your producer and co-host, and joined as always by Francois Jeffrey. Francois, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Back in Atlanta to the great humidity that we have down here.
It is.
How are you? It is thick.
How am I? Held together by coffee and Jesus, as I say. No, I'll be okay. We're gonna make it happen. We're gonna make it through. It's a Monday, but you know what? We're happy to have you back, man. It's been a long time. It's been a long time. You've been gone for like what? 2 weeks? 3 weeks?
Well, I was back in Pittsburgh last week.
That's right. I was gone.
Yeah, you were in Florida. You were in Daytona having fun down there. So.
I know. Yeah. How dare I? Well, I just haven't been in the same space as you for like 2 or 3 weeks. That's what it is. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Well, let's go on ahead and just say hello to our guest from across the pond. We have with us today, Matt Edmundson. Matt, good morning, dear. How are you? Well, morning for us. What time is it there?
It's the middle of the afternoon for me. So, morning is long since gone.
Well, good afternoon to you then. Oh, I have a question. So you're calling from where again?
Liverpool.
Okay.
Yeah, here in the UK.
Gotcha. Okay. I was going to ask, when is tea time like an actual time of day, or is it kind of this like whatever?
Yeah, it's funny. It depends on whereabouts in the country you are, right? So tea time certainly for a lot of people actually means the evening meal.
Oh.
So tea time. It's tea time is normally something you'll say to the kids, which means come and get your evening meal. So it's normally like 5:30, 6 o'clock, somewhere around there.
Oh, I always assumed it was like 2 or 3 p.m. We're going to have tea, and that's before the workday or whatever's over. I don't know. I created this own romantic idea of tea time.
Some people, some people would use it like that. And you can have high tea, you can have 11s and all those kind of things. And so there's, normally 11, 3 o'clock, there's normally and then there's the tea break. If you're in the, the construction industry, we have a lot of tea breaks in that industry. It's used. The trouble is it's used in so many ways. No one really knows what it means because it's been diluted over the years,
That's so funny. Well, welcome to the show. For anybody who's not familiar with you, I think you just did another podcast recently, didn't you?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I've been on quite a few recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been great, actually. I've really enjoyed it. I really have enjoyed it. But yeah, I've been on quite a few recently.
Well, good. Well, we're happy to have you here. Well, for anybody who hasn't caught you on any of the other shows, go ahead and just give us a little bit of your background. What do you do? How'd you get into the world of e-commerce?
Oh, geez. Yeah, no, I've been doing e-commerce since 2002. And so that's a very long time when you think about digital, do you know what I mean? And e-commerce. And so, I have to be honest with you, kind of stumbled across it by accident, was not planned at all. And I remember we put up our first e-commerce website and I remember I still remember waking up the next day going, oh my goodness, somebody has purchased something from me whilst I was asleep. It was like the most bizarre, but, kind of amazing feeling that I've had for a long time. And you kind of go, I love this. And I just fell in love with it there. I thought I woke up richer than when I went to sleep. That's just amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's a really funny way to put it.
Yeah, I've never heard it put that way.
Yeah.
That was great. It was a real buzz too. Every day you still get up. How much money did I make while I was asleep? It's brilliant.
Well, how did you get started back into that? Because the internet itself was different 2 decades ago as it is today. But e-commerce itself, how did you get started there? Making your own website? Was it just like a Wix website? I don't know if Wix
was Wix a thing.
No, around back
then. I don't know actually. It definitely wasn't a Wix website. That much I can tell you. No, it was fun. It was fun. My son was born 2001. My first child was born 2001. And at this point, I had a full-time job, but I was learning how to do websites on the side. We now call that a side hustle, don't we? And I was learning to do websites on the side, and I was doing websites for various different people. The first website I ever did was a friend of mine he came and he said, listen, my church needs a website. I don't know what one is, but I think we need one. Can you help us with it? And this was like 98. And I said, I don't know how to do it, but if you buy the software, I'll figure it out. And that's literally how it started. It was just an opportunity was there and we took it. So 2002, coming back to your first question, in 2002, I contacted a friend of mine because I'd left my job, my full-time job. My son had been born, and I was trying to desperately create my own business to create some, I knew I wanted to be in my own business. I knew I wanted to do something like that. And so I contacted an old friend of mine from my full-time employment days who sold tanning products, as odd as that sounds. And so I asked him, I want to try and sell them online. I don't know what that's going to look like or feel like. Are you happy with me doing that? And I'll just buy them from you as and when I sell them. And he said, sure. Because no one knew back then. No one had a clue about anything. And so we did our first e-commerce website with a bit of software called Actinic. I think it might even still be around, to be fair, which kind of compiled this. It's a really odd system. And we launched the website. It was called TanMad. At tanmad.com. I don't know what's happened to it since, but we launched this website, and then about 6 months later we relaunched the website, but it was code that I wrote. It was my first ever e-commerce website, and I wrote the code. I was so pleased with myself. I was like, yes. I am rubbish at writing code, let me tell you, but I was so pleased with myself, and we got this site launched. And after, I guess it was about 6 months, 9 months, somewhere around there, I sold the TanMad website to the guys that I was buying the actual products from. And that was my introduction to e-commerce.
Wow. That's really impressive that you were able to write code for an entire site with like just kind of figuring it out on your own, because in college, we had to code just one web page, and it was supposed to be like our digital resume. And they were like, oh, everybody's moving to this. There's not going to be the sending a Word doc anymore, or it's going to be a website. And I was like, I don't think this is how this is going to go, but okay, whatever. And so they made us code this thing, and I could not for the life of me figure out the daggum code. We spent an entire semester doing it. I leaned on this woman, Tammy. If you've ever find this, Tammy, God bless you. I paid this woman in like days worth of Starbucks. I was like, please help me, or I'm going to fail this class. That's really, really impressive. So then after you kind of sold that website, I mean, we had a super long conversation. You, Francois, and we were supposed to chat for like 15 minutes about you being on the show. And we talked for like,
sorry about that. Yeah.
What, an hour and a half? No, it was incredible.
It was amazing.
No, we loved it. But so like, we know that like you've done the Jersey Beauty Company and things like that. And that's obviously been super successful. So kind of walk us through the line of between 2002 until today.
Yeah. So in 2006, I won't bore you too much with the details, but in 2006, there's a friend of mine who lived on the island of Jersey. He still lives there now. He's now my business partner. A guy called Andy Topman, such a cool guy, from South Africa, him and his wife, beautiful people. And I'd known them from my sort of previous days. And I said to Andy, either I said to Andy or Andy said to me, we need to start creating an income. He had a health club, a gym on the island of Jersey. And in his gym, he had treatment rooms, beauty rooms, right? He had like 2 or 3 beauty rooms. And people would come, they would get the facials or the massages, and it was all lovely. And so I said to him, well, Jersey, I don't know if you know anything about Jersey, but Jersey is a very small island. It's like 45 square miles, and it is off the north coast of France. Okay. But it's like half an hour from France, but it's like 10 hours from England on the same boat. But it is quintessentially British, but it's kind of independent at the same time. It's got its own parliament, it's got its own tax laws, but everyone speaks English. English money is used there. But it's a beautiful place. If you ever get the chance to go, because Jersey is just lovely. And at the time in 2006, they had this quirky tax law, which meant that you could distribute from Jersey to the UK without paying VAT on products under a certain threshold in value. And VAT is just our sales tax. It's just our GST. Some people can do it, it's just the sales tax. But in England, our VAT, our sales tax is 20%. Okay. So if you can ship a product to a customer without having to charge them VAT, that's a big saving at 20%, right? It's a big deal. And so in 2006, we started distributing professional ski. Jersey Beauty Company was born, and we started distributing from Jersey. And I love telling the story because I remember it really clearly. Andy and I were sat down in the health club having a coffee, chatting about the website idea. And we did a bit of research. And I was like, Andy, listen, we think that between the end of August 2006 and the end of December, so that end of that first year, those first 4 months, we were like, we think we could do sales of around £10,000. And Andy's like, all right, let's give it a go. Let's see what happens. And so we set up Jersey Beauty Company just like that, just on a whim. And we quickly realized that, man, were we onto a gold mine, because we didn't do £10,000 worth of sales, which is what, about $15,000 US. We didn't do that. We did £400,000 worth of sales in the first 4 months, which is, $700,000 US. Jesus. And it went nuts. I mean, proper nuts, and having to deal with all of the problems that come along with being that hyper successful that quickly.
Yeah.
It was bonkers. And so that's kind of how Jersey started. And it was the first time we'd really hit the jackpot. You know when you play in the slots, and I don't know if you do that, but if you play the slots, sometimes you'll maybe win a tenner or $10 or something like that. And then occasionally over in the corner, some guy wins like £500,000 or something like that. And you're like, how did he do? Why can I not be that lucky? Well, we were that guy in the corner that just hit the jackpot. It just blew up. And so yeah, that was. And Jersey's still going today. Jersey Beauty Company is still going today, all these years later. So that's 15 years now. So
that's amazing. Yeah. And so how did you kind of touched on it really quickly, but what were some of those challenges that arose with, anticipating doing £10,000 in revenue and then doing 400,000 and because you've got to be like cranking product like you would not believe. Like what were some of those challenges? How did you navigate them?
Yeah, it's just going to be all the standard product problems that you can think of, right? So how do we get supply of the product? Especially because Andy was really keen on this actually from the start. And I think in hindsight, this was probably one of the key reasons why we're still in business. It was decided from day one that we would never borrow any money to buy stock. And so whenever we placed an order for stock from our suppliers, we paid for it there and then. So the stock that we have on the shelves in our warehouse now, we own every single bit of it. It's not an invoice. It was paid before it ever arrived at my warehouse. And it's interesting when you do that, a number of things happen. One, cash flow becomes a bit of an issue when you're becoming hyper, successful. It's going to be an issue anyway, but how do you manage that? But here we are all these years later, and I know that I can close the doors if I need to tomorrow, and I don't owe anybody any money. I can just literally walk away. Do you know what I mean? It's quite an extraordinary thing. And of course, when you pay suppliers in advance, your suppliers really like you. And actually
Shocker.
Working with, and they'll offer you more discounts. They'll offer you, do you know what I mean? There's all kinds of things that they will do to help you. If you pay them ahead of time, they really, really like you. And so that was I think that's been a big thing. That said, one of our key suppliers has made some crazy decisions over the last 15 years. Crazy decisions. I remember, and this is a really fascinating thing. This is probably another one of those lessons that we learned. Never put all your eggs in one basket. We were selling 80% of our revenue was from one particular brand of products. And I probably shouldn't mention the name, but it's quite a well-known professional skincare brand. Okay. And we were selling their product. And in 2013, they sent me a letter. Bearing in mind, I was probably one of their biggest worldwide customers, right? We didn't have a fantastic relationship, but it was very business-like, the relationship with that supplier. They sent me a letter, and I got it January 2013. I'll never forget it because I had the flu. And I mean, I had the proper flu, not like man flu, like we'd call it in England, the cold. But I was actually properly laid up in bed for a few days. And I got a call from the office, and they contacted me and said, listen, we've had a letter from this supplier. And I'm not sure I'm understanding it right. I need you, can I read it to you and tell me what you think? And I'm lying there, sure, go ahead, read it. And in essence, what the letter said, there was no phone call, by the way. There was no this is what we're going to do. It was just a letter saying.
Just got a letter. And this supplier was located where? I'm sorry.
This is a UK supplier.
UK supplier. Okay.
Yeah. And the UK is actually owned by a US company, but not that I think that has any bearing on anything. But they sent this letter. We received it, I think it was about the 13th of January. And then in essence, it said, in effect, from the 1st of January, we're changing our pricing structure. Basically, the more you buy, the more you're going to pay. And so that had a massive impact on us. Our prices went up 30% overnight from the supplier. And we lost half of our business within the first, I'd say, 1 or 2 months of getting that letter. Half of our sales just instantly disappeared. And so suppliers, on one hand, when you prepay them, some of them are good. Some of them just do things that you cannot legislate for, that you cannot predict or prophesy. And even to this day, I still struggle with the decision that they made in 2013 or whenever it was. Do you know what I mean? Like, part of me gets it, part of me doesn't. But fortunately, we'd built a business that was very, very customer focused. And so we just didn't disappear overnight, which was another thing that we learned. Everything can't be price discounts if you want to be around a long time.
Definitely.
And what was their justification?
Yeah. What's the rationale behind that?
The rationale is, I guess, if you flip it from their point of view, right? So if you're a brand and you're selling your product to me and I'm selling millions of pounds worth of that product on the web, it doesn't take long before that company goes, I can sell that product on the web myself. It just doesn't, right? And so you quickly readapt your model and you become a direct-to-consumer brand. And so by putting my prices up, it meant that in England, I think it's probably the same in the States. In England, it's illegal to do price fixing. So a supplier cannot dictate to me what I sell the product for unless I'm a franchise. Like a McDonald's franchise, every hamburger is the same price, because it's a franchise system. But if every McDonald's restaurant was independently owned, then hamburger prices would all be different, and you would choose which one you would go to. And so it was on the web. So I think because they couldn't price fix, they wanted to bring prices much more in line with their retail price. It's a very gray area of law. I think it kind of leveled out the prices. And I also think they'd used the internet to grow their business. So whilst we were growing, their brand grew massively. And again, I think they just got to a size where they're like, right, we're just going to go directly. And so now, with that brand, now one of many brands which I sell on the site, you can go to their website, and sometimes the value of the offer that they have, I can't compete with on any kind of level. So their direct to consumer model is now working very well for them, and their retail sales are actually generating all the profits, because all the trade sales, I don't think they're making that whole much money from it, if I'm honest.
So you're more so in that wholesale model, and the wholesale model sort of screwed you, I guess, by them going direct to consumer, which makes, from their, just like you said, from their perspective, makes sense. If they have that opportunity to increase their margins significantly by going direct to consumer, and they have the infrastructure behind it, then why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Unless they have a pure B2B outlook, and their corporate level management only wants to do B2B and handle through distributors like yourself.
Yeah.
But how, with that being 80% of what you were selling, how did that impact and change your outlook on the company itself?
That's a really great question. I remember 2013 was probably one of the hardest years we've had in business. I'm not going to lie, it was a really complex, difficult year. Because it didn't look like they were going to change their policy. Was it something that I could challenge in the courts? yes or no. And suing people in the UK is not that straightforward, or challenge something in the courts is not that straightforward. It's expensive, messy business. So at the other hand, I'm really angry with them because there was no communication, there was no preparation. Do you know what I mean? There wasn't that relationship. But at the other part of me is going, there's always a silver lining. Do you know what I mean? There's always something that we can learn from this. It can help us grow stronger in a different way. And so it was hard because I had to let a bunch of staff go. And the guys that work with me, they've always sort of felt like family, if I'm honest with you. You know, I don't think we're the best company in the world to work for, but I think we're all right. I think we do okay. And people that come and work with us tend to stay. They tend to stay for the long haul. Like, I no longer write code on the websites, partly because I'm rubbish at it, partly because there's a team there headed up by a guy called Mark. And Mark was our first ever employee. I mean, going back years ago. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It wasn't early 2000, maybe 2003, 2000. I can't remember when it was actually, when he started working for us. And so he still looks 12 now, funnily enough. He looked 12 when he worked for us. He's kind of that guy that's not kind of aged. And so, you know, it feels very family. And so when you have to lay staff off, that was very, very hard. So we lost about half our people. But we made some quality decisions at that point. We were like, right, one, we are going to make sure that we're never, you know, beholden to a single supplier again. You're going to learn that lesson very quickly. And two, you're going to say things like, well, what would happen if I was the manufacturer? What happens if I could set up my own brand? Or what happens? Do you know what I mean? You start to think and you start to ask all kinds of weird and wonderful questions, which I think are actually amazing, because as much as I am annoyed with that brand, and even to this day, I don't think they're a particularly good brand to work with. I just, out of all the brands we work with, they're just the least enjoyable. I'm not going to lie. I still look at that and go, if that hadn't have happened, I wouldn't be where I am now, if that makes sense. We wouldn't have learned the lessons that we've learned and done the things that we've done. We may well have still been stuck in that rut, probably making a lot of money, but we still would have been stuck in that rut.
Yeah.
Well, and that seems to be part of the conversations that we have today with a lot of businesses that want to focus on IP and building their own brand to mitigate a lot of those risks. Because there are the different models, right? Arbitrage, there's the wholesale model, which is just taking a different brand and sort of reselling it, but buying it at that wholesale discount. And then moving into more of this private label space. Is that sort of where you moved into? Because I know you touched on it just slightly, but do you have your own brands now?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. You see, if you were to say to me, which model do you prefer? I'd probably just say all of them, because there's strengths and weaknesses to each model. And so we still do wholesale, for example, but now we are also doing manufacturing. And we have a range of, for example, I'm the MD of a website that sells food supplements, you know, like vitamins and omega-3s and all that sort of stuff. Well, they're all manufactured. And so we now, let me tell you, that brings its own set of problems. Our best-selling product is something called Opti3. It's an omega-3 oil that is vegan friendly. Okay. So it doesn't come from fish. And in fact, I was just having a little laugh with some of the adverts that we've just done. We've just done an advert which says, buy this bottle and save the lives of 50 fish, or something like that. It's quite fun and
yeah.
And that's let me tell you, that sells by the truckload. It's a phenomenal product with a phenomenal story. I really like it. I really love it. So we're manufacturing that product, but there is one part of the process, that manufacturing process, that is not in our manufacturing facility. It needs a very specialist piece of equipment to do it, and they're now 6 months behind. And so when you order stock from a supplier and they're like 2 or 3 weeks behind, it's a little bit annoying. When you're manufacturing and something goes wrong, it's like 6 to 9 months that you've then got to deal with. And so each model has got sort of different different pros and different cons, hasn't it, really? And yeah. So now I'm facing that with the manufacturing process, which I never would have faced with the wholesale market.
Is that the 6-month delay? Is that a COVID related thing?
Yeah, partially. A machine. There's only two. I think there's 1 or 2 places in the whole of Europe that can do what we need to do for the supplement that we have.
Gotcha.
It's all to. I don't. Tell me if this is boring. It's all to do with the capsule that surrounds the oil. Okay, so when you take an omega-3 tablet, it normally comes in a capsule, which is normally made of gelatin, which is an animal-based product. Obviously, we can't do that because it's vegan certified.
I didn't even think about that.
Oh yeah, all these things you've got to think about. So that product that surrounds the oil, that capsule is the issue. It's there aren't that many companies that can do that in a that is vegan. I think there's a handful of companies in the whole world that can do it. One of them just happens to be in the UK, which normally is great. Another one is based in Italy. And so it's just long lead times. That's all it is. It's just, you have to deal with long lead times.
Yeah, I've still got to get my hands on some of that because I don't eat fish, but I know I need the omega-3, and I didn't even think of that it's gelatin. You don't think about that. But there's lots of steps to stuff like that you don't think about. I mean, like when I started working here, I was like, I had the very consumer mindset. I go on Amazon, I buy the thing from Amazon, and Amazon brings it to me. It's like, no, ma'am, that's not how that goes at all. You are so wrong.
Yeah. If only. Yeah. No, because you've got to think about everything, haven't you? And you've got to think about the whole process. And I think when you get into manufacturing, everything becomes much more important. Like you want traceability on all the materials. You want, do you know what I mean? There's all that kind of stuff thing you want to think about. And especially if you care about something, if you have if you're just a guy that doesn't care about that sort of stuff, they just want to buy a product and they want to sell it, and they don't care how it's made, where it's made, or what the implications of that are. They just want to make money. I think that's one thing. I think that pool of people is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. I'm not going to lie. I think it's one of the modern benefits of one of the benefits of the modern world. There aren't many, but I think that's one of them. Do you know what I mean? And so you kind of think, right, I actually have a cause here. I have something that I believe in. I have a principle that I want to follow. And so when the more you manufacture, the more you get into this, the more you want to ensure that everybody in that supply chain is meeting your values, is meeting your wishes, is meeting your desires. And that accountability and that traceability, I think, is becoming more and more important. So it's no longer a case of, I'll just go to Amazon and buy it. The questions we get asked, honestly, the questions that we get asked about the ingredients, for example, and the source of that is, I've never seen anything like it. And every year that progresses, the questions get deeper and deeper, and people want to go further and further with their insight, with knowledge, with understanding it. And I think it's wonderful.
I would agree. So let's talk about that too, because that was something in our original conversation that fascinated me, was your, trying to focus on creating that transparency in the supply chain, or getting that, because first of all, like obtaining the knowledge, like you not only have to be able to tell people where the stuff is coming from, like you have to know it from the front end and get that information from, I don't know. I just walk us through what making that shift is like, because I'm sure that there's a lot of manufacturers who aren't asking certain questions, or I'm sorry, not manufacturers, but distributors or, third party. Just walk us through that. Cause I think that you're right. Like a lot of, especially with the millennial generation, which the eldest millennial is a lot older than people realize. The eldest millennial right now, I think, is 40. Depending on
40s.
Yeah. So like it's starting to really shift. Like you want to know where your stuff is coming from. And like the conversation we had, even when it comes to like animal cruelty and like the beauty industry, there's some major companies that have all these little brands under the umbrella, and they'll sell the one saying like, oh, this is cruelty free, or this, not tested on animals, Leaping Bunny certified, whatever it is. But then it's just that one brand, but they're doing all the testing to make that brand cruelty free and selling all the other stuff under a different brand, but it's all the same company. It's the same corporate overlord. I don't know. It's just,
no, it's very true.
It's wild. But yeah, so talk to us about that, about getting that traceability.
This was something that when you get involved in the beauty industry, and I mean this with all due respect to the beauty industry, it is significantly evil. I can't think of a better phrase to describe the beauty industry when you think about it. And there was a couple of turning points in my life when it came to that industry. Number one was the birth of my own daughter. And I think when you start to see things through the eyes of your daughter, or you see the world through the eyes of your daughter, everything changes about the beauty industry. And, you know, whether it's photoshopped images, the selling of something which is unreal, the whole way the marketing industry works is to make you feel like you're not good enough. And the only way you'll be good enough is to use a certain product. And so it's based on this idea of shame. And I'm just like, I don't want any part of that. And so it changed how we did the website and changed the stuff that we put on the website. But one of the big things that sort of that really came out of this whole thing was China. And so there has been a move over the last 10 years to try from the brands, the bigger brands, to sell their products in China. And to grow, you know, China's a massive market, so they wanted to reach China. And we were like, okay, but to sell products in China, you have to test on animals. So here you had brands that were saying that they were against animal cruelty, but that were also selling in China. And so there was a little bit of a backlash. And this was kind of like, this was a bit of a wake-up call for me, because it's like, you know, a lot of companies, a lot of bigger companies are saying things to placate their customers, but they're not really values. So, you know, a lot of the skincare companies were saying, yeah, it's cruelty-free, it's animal-free, not because they believed in the cause, not because they cared about it, but because they thought it would sell more product, right? And so when you're then faced with China, you're like, well, let's sell in China. Yeah, I know we've got to test on animals, but we'll test those tubes on animals over there, and then they can get sold to China. And then those over here, they can get sold to, you know, as in the UK or in the States or whatever. And it just struck me that actually the companies themselves were not living up to the values that they were trying to promote. There's a really well-known brand, and again, I won't mention the name because I don't want letters from their lawyers, but there's a really well-known brand that on one hand does something like the campaign for real beauty, okay? And it talks about the beauty of women, and it talks about, you know, women of all different shapes, different colors and different sizes, and you see it in their promotional campaigns, right? And they hashtag it and all this sort of stuff.
I don't mind calling out the name. I won't get a letter from a lawyer. I don't care. It's the Dove Real Beauty campaign.
You've got the Dove Real Beauty campaign. Who owns Dove?
Unilever.
Look at the other brands that Unilever own, right? In the UK, there's a brand called Lynx. I think you call it Axe in the States. It's like a deodorant one. And if you, on one hand, they were doing the campaign for real beauty. On the other hand, you had Lynx adverts on the TV, which were the most sexist, horrible, chauvinistic kind of ads. Do you know what I mean? It's like, men, spray this on you and women will fall at your feet, you know, like you're a lion or something like this. And it was absolutely nuts. So on one hand, they're saying campaign for real beauty. On the other hand, they've got a guy with six-pack walking down the street with these beautiful airbrushed women falling at their feet. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's 6 people on the whole planet that look like that. All of them were in the commercial. Do you know what I mean? And it's that kind of, it was just so utterly wrong. And so, yeah, I think it was eye-opening for me working in the beauty industry, that the discrepancy between what we as consumers value versus what they were purportedly delivering. I really, really struggled with. And so that for me was, I don't know, it was just mesmerizing. And I thought, I just can't be involved in that way. I had to change it. I had to do something different. And I think that's probably why a lot of Jersey customers are still with us, if I'm honest with you, why we get a lot of repeat business.
Yeah. And that's, once you like notice something like that, you can't unsee it either. And you kind of can't ignore it. So would that be your advice for consumers to really do the research on, okay, who is this company owned by if they're not privately owned, and what are the other brands doing as far as being sure that who they're purchasing from is actually aligned with their personal values?
Yeah, I think on one hand, as a consumer, so I'm a consumer, right? So on one hand, I want something that's quick, easy, and convenient. So the Amazon app is the most tempting thing to go shopping on. Let's just be real, right? Because it's quick, easy, convenient. But the other part of me is like, well, I need a new sweatshirt, or I need a new hoodie, or I need a new t-shirt, or whatever it is. I know if you were to ask me, do you want kids in a sweatshop to make that t-shirt? I'm going to say to you, no, of course I don't. But do I then expend the time necessary to research that t-shirt or the company that supply me that t-shirt? Or do I just go to Amazon and buy it because it's quick, easy, and convenient? Now, I think certainly you mentioned it with the millennials. I think certainly with the Gen Z, there is much more investment upon the consumer now to spend the time necessary to do that research. Okay. And I think if you're starting an e-commerce business, this is so critical and this is so important. And for me, this is how you beat Amazon. This is how you win that war. Is you on your website, you become authentically you, and you tell the story from beginning to end of your product and why you care and why it's different and why it changes the world. Or do you know what I mean? Not to get too soapboxy, but why it makes a difference, right? Why should somebody buy it from you rather than a cheap t-shirt off Amazon? What is it? And I think that's really, really important. And so I was looking, just a really stupid example. I was looking for a new cooler. Not that we ever get that much hot weather in England, but, you know, occasionally the sun does come out. And so I was looking for a cooler. We've been having garden parties here at my house because in Europe, we have something called the Euros going on. It's a big football thing at the moment. And I was like, right, we'll get guys around, we'll get the beers out. And so I needed a new, anyway, I looked on a website and I came across a brand which doesn't sell in the UK, but is an American brand, very well reviewed. And their website was just littered with their story and how they produce it and why you should care that it was built in America and how it reduces the carbon footprint and this, that, and the other. And I thought that was very, very clever. If that was sold in the UK, I would have bought that brand.
Very interesting. Well, it looks like we've lost Francois. I don't know what's going on there.
It's not enough. I've bored him. I'm terribly sorry, Francois.
No, I don't think so. He's a big Amazon guy, though, so maybe he was like a little upset by that.
Yeah, maybe just a little bit. Yeah, just a little bit. No, I mean, Amazon is what Amazon is, and you can still be ethical on Amazon. I mean, you've got question marks for me of whether Amazon is ethical, but you can be ethical on Amazon. To whatever that means. By ethical, I mean true to your own values, true to your, you know, what you care about, to your tribe. But yeah, I think I'm not belittling Amazon. I just think it's a lot easier to do on your own website.
Well, it would have to be, right? Because with Amazon, I mean, it would almost be it would be more difficult to actually convey your vision and your mission and everything in its entirety, because there's so many rules and guidelines and what you can put on like your store and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know, that it would be hard to do through that medium, I feel like.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a total Amazon geek or expert, but I think the more control you give to the bigger corporates, the more aligned with their values you become. And so you then ask yourself the question, well, what are their values as a company? Well, you just got to do a quick Google search and find actually some of them, they're not paying the tax that maybe the local guy is paying. They're not paying the workers maybe the way that they should. They're not getting stuff that they're necessarily entitled to. There's a high turnover rate because they don't treat people well, blah, 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 blah. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff. And I know that there are big companies that are trying to make a difference. I'm not anti big corporation at all. I'm probably trying to become one, if I'm honest with you. But I do think the consumer now is much more savvy. And with the internet the way it is, with information much more readily available than it has ever been before, I think as companies, we have to be prepared for that. And I think the companies that will do well, besides the Amazons of this world, are going to be the companies that take the time to really talk to consumers like that consumer cares about everything, and treat them like a proper human being and not just a commodity or a number, and just give them the information that they want in a way that's actually attractive. Do you know what I mean? It's just, that's what sales is for me.
Yeah. Well, with cancel culture too being what it is. Sorry, I don't mean, I'm just going to throw my little thing in here too. Like with the internet and like the availability of information and things like that, like I think it was Reddit or something, they released a trailer for the new Sonic movie, and the internet tore it apart. So they remade the movie. The dang movie was done, and they remade a whole movie because the internet tore it to pieces. So like, as the consumers, we have power, and now it's like a bigger click. Because my dad has always said that, he said, speak with your dollars. If you don't agree with the company, then don't freaking spend your money there. But it's like, you can cancel culture a company. You can, if you can convince a production company to completely remake a movie that was already done, you can, like, I don't know, you have power as a consumer, so use it.
Yeah, you do.
Well, and sorry, I had to step away for a second. I heard everything that was talked about, but I look at it from the opposite perspective, sort of from the consumer side, that, and I hate to admit it, but I don't care too much as long as it's a quality product and it's at a price point that I'm looking for. So with that being said, how does that affect, obviously it's affecting your supply chain. For example, the omega-3s that you have that need to be in this gelatin capsule, but the gelatin has to be vegan. It's affecting your supply chain, but how does that affect your pricing compared to your competitors? And we can make the argument that there are different products all around. There's a different niche market. But just from my pure consumer standpoint, if I see one that's $15 and I see one that's $9, unless it's completely something I'm very well educated about and passionate about, I'm probably not going to spend that extra $5.
Do you think that's really the case, though?
I think for me, that's the case. Now, if there's enough education on it, like eggs, if there's enough, I've been seeing a lot more education on like how eggs, where they come from, what does, cage free and cruelty free, and what do all these different words mean? And honestly, I consume it from small digestible videos like TikTok or Instagram, and these small 1-minute clips that make me feel like an expert right after I watch them. But I go to the store and I'm like, well, these eggs are $2 and those are $6. I eat eggs. I eat 3 eggs a day. I look at it from more of a monetary perspective.
I think if you looked at a commodity purely on the basis of price, then yes, you would go with something that's cheaper, because that's the only thing of value that you can see, or the only way that you can measure value. Okay. But as soon as I start throwing other things in there, okay, so this might be $3, but it was produced in Vietnam by a 6-year-old, who works 18 hours a day in a factory. This one was $15, 5 times the price, but it was produced by a lady working in Vietnam who has enough money to go and put her kid through school, so his kid doesn't, their kids don't have to work in a sweatshop, and she gets paid, during the holidays, and there's a story. Now all of a sudden, there's a value to the difference. Do you know what I mean? The price difference. And so you as a person are then going to attribute some kind of value to that. So that might, for some people, they're not going to care. They just want, literally, they want the cheapest. But I think part of the story that we have as marketeers, part of the story that we have as brand owners, part of the thing that we have to convey is, this is the price, but that's not the only thing that measures value here, right? So what else can we tell you about that is going to measure the value of this? So going back to the omega-3 capsule. So I'm jokingly, it's quite a fun little advert we put on there, saves the lives of 50 fish. Well, actually, for a lot of people, that has a tremendous amount of value, right? So when you look at the price of our omega-3 versus, say, just off-the-shelf omega-3 that does come from fish, it is more expensive. There's no doubt about it, because we can't take advantages of economies of scales, because we have to get things uniquely produced. But as long as I convey that, and as long as I put value behind that, I think people will pay more money. I think it's why people, in the UK, I don't know what the equivalent you have in the States, is why people shop at Waitrose versus Asda. They're 2 supermarkets selling products, but one, I don't know what the average basket value is, but I dare say in Waitrose, it's significantly more than Asda, which is the cut price one. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's a value that they've communicated that. We were watching the Grand Prix over the weekend, me and my son, and there was this funny little bit around the track, which was clearly sponsored by Rolex. And Josh, my son, was like, I wonder how many, kind of extra watches they sell because they sponsor this Grand Prix. And I'm like, well, this is a reason why a Rolex watch is 10 grand versus 100 quid for a watch. Do you know what I mean? There's a value that people ascribe to that. Maybe it's not the right value. Maybe it's that feeling of superiority or ostentatiousness that maybe you would get with a Rolex. I don't know. But if it was all price driven, nobody would ever buy a Rolex. Does that make sense? And I think you have to create that value, that meaning. Certainly in the free market economy, you have to do that.
I think the store equivalent that we could make for here in the States would be Walmart versus Whole Foods, because Whole Foods not only has a lot of like the organic, more health conscious practices, but there's also a lot of sustainability. Everything in there, I think, is fair trade. So you are paying way, way more, but when you can get the same product at Walmart, it's because you believe in those things. Then there's some middle grounds like Sprouts. Like it's a lot. It's maybe not
Sprouts
as like
should just be banned. There should be a worldwide ban on Sprouts, as far as I'm concerned.
Why?
They're just wrong on so many levels. The only time we ever eat them in England, I don't know if it's the same in the States. The only time we ever eat them in England is Christmas deal.
Oh, Sprouts is a supermarket here.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought you were talking about these little green cabbage.
No, those they're pretty nasty. I do agree. They're not great. If you put them in a smoothie with enough extra stuff, you can't really taste them. But it's also a supermarket that's kind of between, like price wise, between like going to Walmart and going to Whole Foods. But it's not all fair trade and things like that.
Why would you call yourself Sprouts though? I mean, I don't know. I just never would.
It's more like a chain farmer's market, for lack of a better term.
Oh, okay. So it's more like the Sprout growth. Okay, I'm with you. Sorry.
Yeah. But that's hilarious. That's funny. I'm like, no, what's wrong with Sprouts? I love Sprouts. Oh no.
And for the supermarket chain that is listening, I'm terribly sorry. I didn't mean to insult you. I was talking about the actual little green fart bombs that we like to call them here in the UK.
That's
but. And I'm sorry, but just to track back, because I just had a thought. So when it comes, you definitely emphasize on that marketing aspect, and making sure that story is associated with your brand. How do you market that to consumers like myself that don't care too much about it? Because if I'm just looking for omega-3s, I'm just going to type in, and you probably just do a quick Google search, omega-3s. I'll filter it by price. But I guess what advertising or marketing opportunities are there to build this community, to build this niche of those that actually do care about it?
So me.
Yeah.
So we're two different sides of the spectrum here. Like you'll just take the whatever. And like, I don't want the fish ones. I specifically want something that doesn't have any fish in it. So
yeah, totally. And for me as a marketeer, the route to you, Francois, is obvious. I come through your co-host, because it's kind of like, this is, on one side of my screen, I've got the evangelist, and on the other side of my screen, I've got the atheist, right? So it's that kind of, what do I do? And I think marketeers, companies that do well, empower their evangelists. They give them a reason to care and a message to shout about. Right. And so I could try and educate you. I could try and interrupt you on Facebook, for example, and say, did you know that omega-3, every bottle you buy kills about 50 fish? I'm going to go, well, I don't care. Do you know what I mean? That's just, I'm not hitting the tune for you. So maybe I'd approach it differently. Maybe I'd go, do you have a family, for example? Do you have kids that take omega-3? Did you know there's, if fish suffer from mercury poisoning and we get omega-3 from fish, it doesn't take a genius to put the two and two together. So how would you like something that's totally pure? So maybe I come at it from that point of view. Do you see what I mean? There's different ways that I can approach you, but the best thing I can do, right? The best thing I can do is send some free product to the evangelist, who's then going to go to you and go, why are you having that junk? Don't you know, blah, 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 blah. And you're going to listen to her much more than you're going to listen to me. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like exactly actually what you touched on at the beginning, being very customer centric, and associating that with your brand rather than just selling a commodity, which it does seem like you go into Amazon, you type in omega-3, you'll get probably hundreds, if not thousands, of listings of just
I'm gonna do it right now.
Omega-3. I don't know what the difference between any of them are, but that would be a really good way, I guess, to get in touch with me, because then Lisa would probably call me out if she did see me taking regular omega-3s
I have no,
here.
listening to Lisa talk, I have no doubt she would call you out on that. And I'm terribly sorry for all the trouble that's going to ensue after this broadcast when she chews you out for the omega-3 that you are taking. But that's okay. The other way I suppose I could approach it is ask you a question: why do you take omega-3? And then listen to your answers and come in at it that way. Because there'll be a reason why you've decided to take this. That if I can pick that reason out, I can latch on that and go, oh, okay, that's really interesting. Have you thought about ... And so if you're not taking omega-3 that's not from fish because because of a dietary thing, a dietary stance that you have, maybe you are doing it from a health benefit. Well, okay, in that case, let me talk to you about health, and we could go that way. So you're right. It's all about understanding you, what makes you tick, what makes you work, and making sure that I've got the education, the information to connect with you on that level.
Well, and that keyword education, because it does seem that marketing is going more towards education than it is what you were talking about, like Axe body spray. It did not educate me as to how it's going to make me smell. It showed me, hey, I'm going to have a bunch of women falling at my feet if I use Axe body spray.
Yeah, that's why 13-year-old boys use it in substitution of a
Yes,
shower.
It's very emotional. It really appeals to those emotions in you. But how does that tie into, or I guess, what can companies start to do? Because it's very different when you have the manufacturing process yourself. And you have your own manufacturing plants and you use a few partners, as opposed to purely outsourcing all of your manufacturing, right? Using a contract factory and just saying, hey, I want to make this water bottle and I want it to be in this design. What can you do to prepare before even reaching out to the factories to know what you want? Because if I go in there, first thing I would do is personally probably look at Google and just be like, well, what are other people advertising? Oh, it's BPA free. It's, I don't know, cruelty free, if that's a thing for water bottles. But what would you do, I guess, before even starting a product launch?
I think, I like you, I'd definitely be at Google. I'd be trawling through Amazon and going through all the listings on Amazon. I'd be reading the reviews and the questions and the comments, and I'd be going, what are some of the common things here? I would definitely be understanding the consumer market. I have this simple chart that I like people to draw. It's like a quadrant. Okay, so if you can picture this, it's like I appreciate if you're listening to this on audio, you can't see what I'm doing, but it's in effect, it's like a plus sign. It's a quadrant. You've got in effect 4 squares, and on the horizontal axis we track trust. Okay, how much does the consumer know and trust you as a supplier? Okay, so if you're just starting out, your trust is little. Okay, I then marry that on the vertical axis with something that I call knowledge. Okay, so how much does the consumer know about the product that you're selling? Okay, so if you have a product, if you're a company, so let's take Jersey when we first started out. Okay, we had products which people knew a lot about, so high knowledge but low trust. So how do you win those clients? Well, the high knowledge, low trust clients, you normally win through price, okay, because they know what it is they want, and they know how to get what it is they want. And so these are the guys that are hunting for value, okay. But if you're selling a product that really has low knowledge, then how you deal with that's quite interesting. Normally that is through something like education or understanding. And so I would definitely be looking at ways to increase both my knowledge and the consumer knowledge. So let's take water bottles, which was the example you used. I've got a Yeti on my desk here. It's not, it's a nice, I'm not particularly loyal to them, but it's a nice cooler. It keeps my water cool. So if I was reselling things, I'd be like, right, what do the customers know about? What kind of knowledge do they have already? So things like BPA free and all that sort of stuff. I'm going to be looking at sustainability. I'm going to be looking at traceability and wanting to understand where things have come from. I want to know why I should care it's made in the USA. Do you know what I mean? There's going to be a whole bunch of things that I want to know the answers to. But I'm also going to be looking to build my own personal knowledge on this. And so, because if I'm going to educate those customers that have low knowledge, I need to be at least one step ahead of them to help them learn, if that makes sense. And so I'm going to be visiting different water cooler manufacturers. I'm going to be looking at their processes. I'm going to be talking to them. I'm going to have a very, very deep understanding of their values. And I'm going to have a deep understanding of my values as a person, right? So interestingly, one of the first things that we ever do whenever we do coaching, whenever we go into companies, usually within the first hour or two, I want to know what the values of that business are. Right? Because whatever it is that I'm selling, whatever it is that, let's say I'm buying these from Yeti, I want to make sure that their values and my values are aligned. Okay. And if they're aligned, winner. If they're not, I'm quickly going to run out of steam for that brand if it doesn't sell. I'm just not going to care enough to try and promote it, to try and grow it, but if I'm having these manufactured myself, I'm still doing all of those things, but I have to create something in this. I have to create a story which gives people a compelling reason to buy from me. And it can't be that it's made from bamboo because everyone else does that. It can't be that it sponsors a child in Africa because somebody else is doing that already. What is it that is compelling that's going to enable people to buy it from me? And for me, that's all that knowledge and trust. How do I grow the customer's knowledge and how do I grow the customer's trust in me? Because the best consumers to have by far, are the high knowledge, high trust customers.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And how do you prepare your manufacturers? Because, for example, let's say you're outsourcing the gel capsule itself. What sort of conversations do you have with them to make sure that all of this is even achievable?
Yeah, totally. We were talking to another company in Wales actually last week, as we're wanting to change the plastic bottles that our products come into. Currently, our bottles are biodegradable. Okay, so we're not a big fan of plastic. In some respects, it's an ideal product to ship in the vitamins. Do you see what I mean? We could do it in glass. Glass has its own problems. It's not actually that sustainable or eco-friendly itself, but it is recyclable. And so, but plastic has got a bit of a bad rap at the moment. And so we're kind of like, should we avoid plastic, even though it's biodegradable, or should we just tell that story better? So we were having a conversation with a new supplier that we're talking to about supplying the bottles. Okay, a guy down in Wales, fascinating guy. If he's watching this, how you doing? It was a really interesting conversation because at first I didn't like him. I definitely didn't like him. I definitely didn't like him. He just started telling me his life story. Like, I genuinely don't care, but it's great that you're telling me this, But by the end of the call, I'd understood them as a company. I understood him as a person, and I'd started to dig in their values as an organization a little bit. And he was starting to say things in those stories that actually I deeply cared about. He was using phrases like zero carbon footprint. And so he was telling us how he won a contract with NHS England, our big, medical authority over here. Because in effect, the supply system that he has, there is actually zero carbon footprint because it all happens within this one big factory. Whereas he doesn't have to outsource its different things. And so I'm like, oh, okay, this is cool. So the things that matter to me, zero carbon footprint, is this recyclable? So he's one of the few suppliers that can give us 97% recycled plastic, for example. We were looking at ideas like, could we use ocean source plastics? Because that would be a really cool story to add to what we're doing. And he then starts to chip in his own ideas once he understands where we come from as a company. And I think whether we use that supplier or not, I don't know. But that's what I'm looking for. Can they obviously deliver what I need, but can they be aligned to the values that I have? What's your workforce like? When I go down, are they happy? Are they singing? Or are they miserable? Right? Just things like that will make a big difference to me. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, Francois, but in effect, that's kind of the experience that I'm going through right now.
Yeah, no, I think it does. Yeah, and I wanted to dig in on that question only because I think a lot of companies that are building brands and are thinking about, aligning it more with their personal values rather than just what can I be competitive with on the market, sort of appealing to the me consumer, just be price competitive and have a decent brand and, some level of trust. And even if I don't trust them too much, it's not that big of an investment if I lose out on $10, $15. But I do see a lot of people that we talk to are starting to ask those same questions. Hey, where are these factories located? Are they associated with XYZ that they just heard in the news recently? Is it, are there any child labor in the factories that they're producing these items at? Very fair questions. And, when you take it more to a corporate level, these are typically questions that are answered through audits. But that can be also just answered through conversations like you're having with your suppliers and aligning those values together, which I do think are important. If that's the angle that you want to go with, and that's the upwards trend for your company itself, it's important to have those conversations. It's just, how do you have them? Well, in your case, it was just a genuine, hey, this is who I am as a person. So no, I think it answered it spot on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I like the idea of audits, because actually audits confirm everything.
Right. Trust but verify.
The independent audits. Yeah. Trust and verify as things. It's great. I could have just been talking to a very nice, very clever salesperson. Do you know what I mean? And so I like the idea of audits, and I like the idea of verifying. In the UK, we have various standards. So I can just say, do you meet such and such standard? Yes or no? There you go.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Matt, this has just been fantastic. I'm going to have to cut myself off here. I'm not even worried about Francois this time. I'm worried about me, because we're at the hour mark and I could keep going for another hour. But thank you so much for coming on the show with us. If anybody has any questions about the information you shared today, or maybe they want to work with you, where can they get in touch with you?
Sure. Just reach out to me. Head over to my website, mattedmundson.com. You'll find all the links to all the relevant social media platforms there, and love to connect with you. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Well, thank you again for coming on. For anybody who's listening or watching, if you'd like the information that you heard today, please be sure to give us a like, comment with your thoughts, share with your network, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast on Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating, or really whatever star you feel is appropriate. We want to know how we can make the show better. If you know somebody that should be on the show, send me an email and let me know, Lisa@Noviland.com. And yeah, just be sure to subscribe and ring that bell for notifications so that you never miss a conversation with leaders in supply chain and e-commerce like Matt Edmundson. Matt, thank you so much again for coming, dear. It's been an absolute joy.
It's been a privilege. Really appreciate it. I've enjoyed it. It's been really good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt.
All right. We'll talk to everybody soon.